I was in masterminds, and then, I just started seeing it honestly come across my Instagram feed with certain people who were having different types of challenges, launches, and things like that. And so I like to see the diversification of how I can reach my audience, especially therapists, because they're talking to people all day, so they may not want to look in front of a screen. And so I said, well, let me try it. It was just nice to give therapists the option that if they didn't want to look at a screen, they could just like tap in, because I know that they like my audio podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Launch Your Private Podcast case study episode. This one should be Launch Your Private Podcasts S with an exclamation point, because we have Dr. TK, a clinical psychologist and therapist business coach, with us today. And when I tell you that she's using it in all the ways that we expect people in Hello Audio to use it, she's using it in all the ways. And we're going to focus on a couple really cool things that she's doing. But I just wanted to preface this by saying she is a private podcast pro. I didn't ask you, actually, Dr. TK, how many private podcast feeds you have, even if some are archived. Do you know that number?
So I know I have 25 that I'm looking at. I don't
Not
even see the
bad.
archived ones, but I know 25 are sitting there.
There you go. Okay, she's up there, folks. She is up there. So welcome. We're excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Cool. So yeah, take us to the moment when you're like, oh, I need to put private podcasts in my business. And maybe you didn't realize they needed to go everywhere. But yeah, take us back to that time when you're like, yeah, this is the thing.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I found out about private podcasts years ago, but I didn't know what it was. And it was Sarah Massey, I think. So I had taken one of her courses, and she was in her beta launch. And she was like, hey, you can also get the private podcast. And it's funny, I saw the name of the platform, and it wasn't until she was on the podcast that I was like, that's where I originally heard it from. So it was like the aha moment. But then it kind of like went out and then went in, because at that time in business, I was so into looking at a core shell because of the way my brain was working that I didn't even conceptualize the benefit of the audio podcast portion, to be honest. And then after 2020, I was in masterminds, and then, I just started seeing it honestly come across my Instagram feed with certain people who were having different types of challenges, launches, and things like that. And so I like to see the diversification of how I can reach my audience, especially therapists, because they're talking to people all day, so they may not want to look in front of a screen. And so I said, let me try it. And I did. And it was just nice to give therapists the option that if they didn't want to look at a screen, they could just like tap in, because I know that they like my audio podcast.
Yeah. So you have a public podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your business structure? I forgot to ask that on the top, but tell us a little bit about what your business is and who you serve.
Yeah, so I would say two different wings. And so I'm a clinical psychologist. So I do mental health services now in the community, not really a lot of one-on-one. So I do workshops. And then on the coaching side, where that's about 95% of my time, I primarily coach mental health providers like at different levels. So the first level is just like I call it psychoeducation, but business education around like what's possible in business. My main program is a private practice academy where we teach them really the operating systems of how to, build their business from scratch and market it and make money and all those things. And then the next level, I have live events, CE workshops, in-person events. And then the upper level is my mastermind. So my mastermind is for a select group of therapists. And that's those who don't want to do one-on-one. They've seen what I featured online, YouTube, Instagram, and they want to have their own live events. They want to venture out into coaching a little bit, write books, have digital products. And so that program is way more expansive, but that's like our highest level program.
That's really helpful. So you can see this structure probably has a lot of options on where to put private podcasts. And yeah, you've definitely taken that to the max. So in our kind of pre-conversation, you were talking about the 4 categories that your private podcast fit. Why don't you share that with us?
Yeah. So the first category is boot camps. And so the way that I launch, at least in this season of life, I like to show up live for my audience. So I do 3 to 4 day boot camps, live stream on YouTube, and then we give them resources like in a community. The second category is I call it community. So that's where I would say my public podcast serves a purpose. And also I've created private podcast feeds for people who just want to get to know how I've been so resilient being a Black woman and a psychologist from Compton. Like a lot of that they want to be able to pick up and go and pivot when things go bad, but they're not sure how I do it. So I decided to like unlayer a lot about myself in that feed. The third category is more of the paid series and the coaching programs. And so I've done for that private practice program, I developed in the last year a coaching companion because I find that, entrepreneurs, we get busy, therapists are emotionally tired. So I'm trying to keep them on track because some of them can't come to the live calls. I've created like mindset series and things like that. And then the fourth category is what's called the me category. So the me category is if I've had coaches and they give me a Zoom call, I upload the video to convert it to audio. And then I also upload manifestation affirmations of whatever I'm working on in my personal life. And instead of me having to say the affirmations when I'm brushing my teeth, I just click play.
So
I
good. I
love
know there are like apps that do that, but the fact that you're tying it into the coaching experience that you're going through, that's a really great way to, I don't know, boost it from yourself, right? From your own perspective, like boost your results. So I love that. And what a nice full, you got the full spectrum. You're hitting it from all angles for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
love that. And I also love that audio makes it easy for the
Mm,
personal affirmations. I think that's one thing we don't hear a lot about, but you can easily build habits around that because it's audio and because it's so convenient. And so you can kind of pull that out at any point in time, whether you're on a walk or like brushing your teeth. I didn't even think about brushing your teeth and using that time when you're, I mean, I think that's a great tip to really do that. So I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I've done it at night. Like, depending on how heavy I want to
mm,
manifest, sometimes I'll say, okay, I need to get back into my routine. So I'll do it in the morning and then I'll do it in the evening. And it's pretty cool because, especially one particular thing that I want to manifest in my personal life, my son sometimes will hear it and he'll be like, oh,
mm.
what, you got another podcast? He knows what a podcast is. He's 6. And I'm like, yeah. And so he'll just listen to it and then go to sleep.
Oh, that's
Oh, I
awesome.
love that.
There was another guest we had that her teenager it was recent. She hasn't been on yet, like not public as we're recording this, but yeah, her teenager was listening to her content and was like asking about it or something, or was it a student of hers teenager was listening, something like that. So that's really, I think that's really powerful because I know a lot of parents use it during pickup and stuff like that, and the idea that you can have it playing. Yeah, it's in the background. Yeah, they're little, but like it's still, if it's good content and teaching them good things, like it's planting
Exactly.
in some way. And man, are they sponges. I have a 2.5-year-old, so I'm just starting on this journey. But even now, like I look at him and I'm like, oh, like this is your reality is being shaped right now. I like fully see that. I can't remember what he said, but it like hit me and I was like, yep, here it goes. Like, are we modeling exactly what we want to be modeling? Those kind of things. So, anyways, yeah, powerful stuff. Okay, cool. So, I think we want to jump into the companion, the coaching companion. First of all, I like the name of that. And I know we've had like coach in your pocket language, but like coaching companion's really cool. So let's talk about that feed, where the idea was like came from and then like how you actually went about creating it. And guys, we didn't really talk about Dr. TK's background, but she's a professor. And so of course I'm like, yay, my people are on. But that I love that because now I can see you're going to hear when she explains this feed and the reason behind it, you're going to be like, oh yeah. And a lot of times people who are in this space become teachers. And I really think like we're all teachers in different capacities, whether we have a degree behind us or not. But these kind of tips you get in, academia, in teaching, when you're out there in the field doing the work. And so it's easy to pass on to folks who aren't necessarily teachers with a capital T. And I think this is a great feed that someone could totally easily implement and really help their students get results. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, glad that you said that because I'm like, I wish that I had this when I was teaching because it would have been quite
Right?
helpful, especially when things had taken a turn, you know?
Mm,
And so, yeah, I came up with the idea because I had launched this particular program. It's more of my signature program, which gets the most therapists. I had launched it back in 2019 as a group. Over time, the cohort had changed because of the heightened need of mental health therapists in the field, because some of them weren't, staying at their jobs per se. So they wanted to have their own business. And so we've had like 8-week cohorts, 4 intense week cohorts on Saturday mornings during 2020, and then
mm,
12-week cohort. But what I started finding, because I am the professor who will take a look in the backdrop of the Kajabi portal and I will notice, hey, like y'all not getting past this particular area. And then we would bring it to them, on a coaching call. And sometimes they don't want to speak up. I just thought, okay, I'd always rather bow out. I'll say bow out gracefully as long as I know that I've tried everything. And what I
mm,
mean by that is I'm going to keep trying until I've thrown everything I can like spaghetti on the wall to see if I can get these individuals to participate because they invested and I don't want them to lose out on their investment. And so I was playing with names and I describe it like, coaching on demand, coaching in your pocket, etc. And I just Googled some words or a thesaurus or something. And I came up with the word companion. And I'm like, companion reminds me of like Loki therapy. When I tell
Mm,
the client, like, I'm walking alongside of you, but I will not walk that far in front of you because you're not going to learn that way by me leaving you? And so I chose the name of the program, Coaching Companion, and we developed it at the end of last year for the cohorts in which we started doing 12-week cohorts.
mm,
So what I thought, because I know that Hello Audio gives you the ability to do instant drip, or available or drip it out or whatever. So I wanted it to match our portal. Our course portal is dripped out. And I did that 2 years ago and people thanked me for it. Some people may not like it, but that's okay. Because what it does is it keeps them from going to the end and then asking all these questions that they should have gotten in module one. So I'm like, you're not doing that. So I like drip it out and they have to do like a questionnaire to get to the next module. So I wanted the coaching companion to do the exact same thing, but I made it simple. So it's like every episode, I swear, is no more than like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It's dripped out based on what our team has seen of for people who do complete the course, how long does it actually take them to go through the course? And we know it's two groups of people in our program. It's those who are just starting from scratch, and it's those who already have a business, but they came to our program for the systems aspect. And so we found the happy median. And then maybe the first three episodes are back to back because I just want to get them used to opening up the podcast like an email
mm,
series.
mhm.
So we send it to them back to back. And then after that, they're dripped out like every 7 days, depending on how big the module is. It may be every 14 days, or then it's 21 days. And it stretches across 12 weeks in total. When I'm looking at the two cohorts that we tested this out on in the beginning, most people, in terms of how many people were in the cohort, most people made it to the hardest part of the course.
Mm,
It's not hard to me, but that's when they have to put together their standard operating procedures
yep,
and they fight me on it.
yep.
So I find that they stop right there, and
Mhm,
they just show up to the coaching call. But some people did download it. And so it's optional, it's not mandatory. So that's another thing. It's not tied to their course. But I have found that most of them made it to the main area of like marketing, which is where their money is.
mm, mhm.
So yeah, so that's how we use it. And we've heard good reviews about it in terms of like if they fell off track, they can just click play. And I also give an excerpt in the audio portion where I tell them, hey, if you're not in this part of the course yet, give yourself grace. That's my main statement. Give yourself grace. It is okay. Just you can listen to this audio if you want to. But in the audio, all I'm doing is listing the objectives so that they know what to expect just in case they're resisting going to the course shell. Like, hey, this is what you're going to learn over the
Mhm,
next 2 weeks. So they get excited and then they go click the course.
That's critical. I think, Lindsay, you
mhm.
and I both know when you're in a course, you're designing a course, there is a part where, it gets a little, there's
There's
some
always
work,
the hard
some
part, and
work.
it's where everyone
Yeah.
yeah, the
And that's
meat
where
of it is
everyone,
like yeah.
yeah. And they get stuck and it's not always, it's not skill, it's not ability. Most of the time, it's mindset. It's just these
Yes.
underlying fears that are preventing them from going. And I love that you're using audio as a way to pre-frame and to kind of ease those concerns to address those underlying fears and get them excited about doing the work. Because as you know, like we have the same issue even with Hello Audio. People creating their first feed is a
Mhm.
mental block. And they're like, you know what? It just seems like it's software. It's got to be hard. And then they do it and you're like, oh, I wish I would. It took me 5 minutes. I wish I would have known that sooner. But similar to that, it's like, how can you ease those concerns? And audio makes it there's no friction. They don't have to show up
Mhm.
to a call. I wish I had more teachers in my life that said, "Give yourself grace." Is
Mm.
that especially with our high achievers and our perfectionist folks that don't always give themselves grace, but the audio to help them get through those tough times, whether you're in a coaching program or whatever you're doing. I think that's key to getting your success rates. Ultimately, what we all want is client success, right?
Mhm.
That's the key.
Yeah. It's such a low lift, like, tiny win. I mean, I've heard it called so many different things, low pressure way to invite them back in with this, like you said, literally like a minute to 3 minutes. And it's your teacher being like, because you don't have that aspect of like, you're at home. They don't have to show up at on
Exactly.
Tuesday at 8 a.m. or whatever, getting a grade. And so there's a coaching call maybe or something like that. But here's a cool way for you to check in on them, like async. And it's still that like motivation factor, like I'm in your corner, I'm cheering you on. Here's what's coming, right? And I think a lot of us in this space, like people who are buying business courses and stuff, have probably bought a lot of business courses and stuff. And they have found out that maybe they haven't been as successful, right? And like they want this one to be different, right? And so now here's a teacher that's adding in these extra layers that show that you care, that show that you know where they're going to get stuck. I used to always teach this too in my program. It's like really the permission. You said give yourself grace, but like also the permission and the recognition. Like, hey, if we just name the thing, like a lot of times people are like, oh, thank you. Yes, I am scared about module 3. Like, no, I don't want to write an SOP. Like, that's why I brought this program. Of course, the thing, the promise is going to be the hardest part where they actually have to do the
Mhm.
thing. It's not getting the notebook ready and right. Everyone starts with an A. It's actually now doing the work. And so by giving them that little win, and that's what I think is really important in a very busy world that we all are in. Even just downloading and listening to that one episode, it's like, oh, I did something towards this course. And I think that has, I just want to throw this out there, that has more power than you imagine. Like they didn't accomplish quote unquote anything. They didn't write the SOP, but you made it seem not hard and that you expect them to be stuck. And I think that helps. That's like the adult learner brain that we need to like tap into. It's we're all adults, like we're all busy. And I'm just going to invite you back in. And I think the podcast, like Nora said, not friction. There's not a lot of friction. There might be some notifications they get. They just have to press play and they can do it pretty much anywhere. And it's like, oh, cool. I don't have to like log into Kajabi yet. And then you get them excited and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm back in. It's that like 5 minute rule thing too. Like
Yeah.
just exercise for 5 minutes. Just listen to this like short. Oh, now I'm back in, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I'm listening to the both of you talk, I just wanna laugh so bad because I'm like, if they just simply clicked to play and then said, "Okay, she's gonna help me create the automation," and honestly, if they just remember what I told them in the boot camp,
Mm,
most of the SOPs, get this, are already created for them. All they have to do is copy it to their Google Drive because we've had over 35 launches with this program over the last 4.5 years. You don't think
that's
over
not
300
nothing. Yeah.
therapists have not told me that they getting stuck on SOPs? And so I'm an
Hmm.
experimenter. That's even my middle name. Right. And so what I'll do, because I do quality assurance. That was my background
Mm.
as doing therapy. Half of it was also quality assurance of these programs
Uh,
working for government agencies. And so I tell people,
Oh,
like, you never
interesting.
know, yeah, what people's gifts are. And I don't expect this to be your gift. I don't even expect you to want to do a SOP. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, if you want to own a business, you have to have documentation of some sort, especially if you want to hire or whatever. So what's interesting is as soon as they log into the portal, they're like, oh, wait,
Oh,
oh,
it's
I
easy.
do remember seeing this whole shared drive. Oh, wait, there's a folder for all these SOPs. Wait, you already created how to hire somebody? Wait, you gave me job descriptions? You gave me how to onboard a new client? I'm like, you bought a systems program. Like, what sense? But it's like they get stuck, as Nora was
Mhm.
saying, just with even clicking play, whether it be the Kajabi portal or the podcast. And then I kid you not, when they finally show up to a Q&A call, because a lot of them don't. They'll listen to the replay, maybe, or they'll go into the Facebook group. It's interesting because at the time when they do come to the call, they'll ask a simple question and I'll say, oh, did you check out the share drive? Because that's like our magic word. And they like, no, I saw it in the beginning like 12 weeks ago. I'm like, everything you just asked me is in the share drive. So I'm not technically going to answer the question because everything is written out for you. And I kid you not, they'll run over to Facebook after the call and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I waited like all these months to ask this question. And that's why I didn't tell y'all, but I had mentioned it. I have a DTA, that's the name of the program, a Q&A podcast. I got this from a
Oh, no,
podcast
yeah,
I was
you
listening
didn't.
to.
Yeah,
So
Mariah.
yeah, so what I have been trying to do is like make it like the synchronous versus the asynchronous. And if
Mm.
they're not able to make it to our specific day of the call, or honestly, they're in their head so much with like ego and shame that they don't even want to ask their question out loud because they have a degree. That is a thing I'm constantly talking to them about. I don't care about your degree, you're a business owner.
Mm.
And I said, let me make this easy for you. At this point, I've done all I can do. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, let me make this easy. If you don't want to ask your question out loud, if you cannot come to the coaching call, because that was one of my rules, if you come, I'll answer your question there. Then I need you to be very specific. I need you to put your question on the Q&A form, and then I will answer it on a private podcast. So literally every week I'm in Facebook saying, hey, y'all, I'm just kind of sitting at home looking at my son, Avery. They know who he is. And I'm just waiting to record some questions. I know your business need questions. And some people have done it and other people have seen their questions and they see the difference because those people that are asking questions are those very people we're featuring in our newsletter.
Mm,
Like, and it's from people who started businesses from scratch. And these are
mhm,
some people who, like this person over here, they already have a part-time private practice and they're stuck. This person
mm,
over here just started their private practice from scratch and they're passing them up because they don't care. They're asking everything. Private podcast feed, Q&A call, Facebook group, they taking advantage. And those are the students who we often will say, can you just like learn a little bit from them? All they did was ask a question.
yeah.
There's a couple really important things here because in anyone that's listening that has a coaching program, and if you're coaching on, I think we all coach on things that typically there's some mindset stuff happening, whether there's shame, you've got some stuff going on where you think you should know the answer, and there's some, whatever those mental blocks are. And audio is so, it just disarms all of that. And I think it's so important that I know we've all probably been on live calls that where maybe the environment that you're in physically, if you're in a coffee shop or maybe you're sitting in a car with your family, like it's not always ideal to unmute and ask questions or whatever that is. Could be just a mental thing that your mental block that you don't want to answer it. But like using audio in this way is great because it reaches those people. And you're right, they have to ask the question. And we always love the question, the people that ask questions and take the action. But it makes it so much easier and it feels like there's just less friction and maybe less roadblocks for some of those folks to reach them. And it is really disarming in that in a very good way to get through to some of those folks that may not otherwise speak up and
Mm,
maybe haven't found their voice yet. So I think that's
yeah.
awesome.
There are the lurkers, right, for lots of things, lurkers in the community, but then I could see a lurker on a Q&A feed where it's like, "Oh, my questions are being asked, like, I'm good." Like, whatever, right? And you're still getting value in a little bit different of a way. So I do think it is respecting folks that might be right there in that place in their life, whatever season, if you will. And yeah, I think there is something, Nora, to your point about audio where it's, I don't know, I think it was Mariah who might have said something like this, and maybe Dr. TK, you can mention how your listeners or your students are taking it, but it feels like you're talking to them because their headphone is on. And it's like on a call, like you see all the faces and it's very like Brady Bunch. And you're just like, there's a lot of distraction and I'm looking somewhere else. You know what I mean? I'm half listening. But when it's like an audio and you turn it on, and often people turn on that audio like at certain points in like their day, they're engaging in like a mental way that they're not when they're sitting in front of a computer. And it's like your voice in their ears directly. They're like, "Oh, Dr. TK is telling me how it is right now." And it feels like she's on my shoulder. Like, and especially someone with your experience. When you've taught the same course 35 times, is what I think I heard you say, for 4 years, you know these people backwards, forwards, like you know them better than themselves, right? And so when you're creating content, I know it. I can feel it already. They're like, "Oh my God, how did she know that?" It's like, guys, you bought this from me on for a reason, and I'm here to help you, I promise. And I think
Mhm.
audio is that disarming way. It's like a little bit of a disconnect, not disconnect, because that makes it seem like negative, but the little like it can feel more individual because you're not in the like communal setting and you're walking the dog. It's in very private moments, I guess is where I'm going with it, versus the very like public showing up on Facebook or doing a call or whatever. It seems very public. And there is something about the one way communication, like it's coming from you, their teacher, into their ear. And I'm doing something personal at the time. And so I'm like ready to hear it because I'm like choosing the audio and choosing to turn it on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always get all philosophical about this stuff.
Well, I mean, I even like the word choosing because
Mm,
in connection with what we've pretty much been talking about, is they even still have to make the choice. Like when they
mm,
get the email that says, "Hey, you have another podcast," today, and they know what the podcast is, they still have to make the choice to press
mhm,
play. And so, how they receive it, I had a group of clinicians last year that were like volunteers, and they were over our Facebook group, just like engaging or whatnot. And when I had them on a Zoom call one day, I said, "Hey, since y'all getting to know me, I'm getting to know you. I would like to ask a very open question and please do not hold back." And I thought that they would tell me the truth, and they did. One person in particular, she was newer to our community, probably within the last 6 months. And I said, "Hey, I'm just curious." This is before I did the hello audio. I said, "Why don't people ask questions that are therapists?" I said, "Because, I'm very outspoken, but there was a season in my career where I wasn't, and I paid the price for it when I was in my training and didn't speak up for myself. So I told myself I would never do that again because I'm paying all this money for this investment, and there's no way I'm gonna graduate or fail for that matter. And so the same thing can transfer over into your business." So she said something really interesting. She said, "Dr. TK, you actually are honestly," because they have accountability groups. She said, "I've talked to a lot of them, and I can only speak for myself because they're not here. But what I will say is like you've put out the course material. We know that you go above and beyond making yourself available in any medium to answer our questions." She said, "I don't think that's the issue. The issue is they know that when they ask the question, you're going to hold them accountable, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
want them that." She was like, "They don't want to sit with the fact that I didn't do my homework." You know? And so
Mhm.
she was like, because they don't want to turn the mirror on them. Of course, I started laughing. And she was like, "Did I say something wrong?" And I said, "No." I said, "But the reason why I'm laughing is this is the very thing that y'all ask for your clients to do in therapy." So that's
Right?
one of the reasons why I love working with therapists because I will flip the script on them. And one day I did it hard, where I gave them, like, some questions, and I said, "What would you do in this case study?" And they were like, "Oh, the client gotta close down their we gotta close down their case. They're not participating." And I said, "It's funny because the metrics actually that I showed y'all, I said the word therapy, but it was actually y'all course portal and Kajabi." Oh, it's free, and they were like, "What?" Oh, you know? And I said, "So should I shut it down? Should the teacher leave?" And they were like,
Mm,
"No." And I said, "So over the next couple of months," that's when I brought in Hello Audio, I'm like, "I'm going to add things. But the
mm.
way that I teach is if I add it and you're also not using it and it's costing me time, because that's exactly what I'm teaching you not to do. If it's costing me more time, I'm going to remove it. But you also got to shift your mindset to like, if you made an investment, I think what they do is they say, because I made this such and such amount investment, I need to be able to have all these touch points. But the reality of it
Mm.
is you're not even using all those touch points. You just want to say that you have it. And to
Yes.
me, that's actually a lack mindset. That's not an abundance mindset. Because in a mastermind, I ain't got no one-on-ones. It's 4 sessions all year for 24K. But it's all about the relationship. So
Mhm.
you pick and choose. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, you got everything. You got the podcast, you got the Q&A podcast, you got the accountability group, you got Facebook, you got live calls. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, but I love the diversification. And that's why when Mariah was on the podcast and I had heard about the asynchronous stuff, I
Mhm.
had just thought about like, okay, that is my way of being in their ear. And I know that it's working because I get a lot of that feedback from my private podcast because that has almost 500 episodes. And
Mm.
every time somebody gets in my DM and say, "Man, I needed to hear that message today. I was taking my walk today. Thank you so much." Like, I'm gonna go do my work, even if they're not my client. So I
Mm.
know they hear differently than what they see. Because another aha
Yeah.
moment that I had yesterday is I think people know this, but I don't think people think about it in grace of a therapist
Mm.
is that people verbally vomit on us all day long. And unfortunately, we can't go tell nobody. Yeah, if I'm teaching them and coaching them, and my calls are in the morning on purpose, I no longer do them in the evening because they're tired. They don't want to hear nothing else.
Mm.
Right. So I stopped that 3 years ago. So I meet with them at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time in the beginning of the week on Monday. Everything is strategic based on metrics. So 9 o'clock is the best time for East Coasters lunchtime. So when I've done that, I've realized that sometimes I think that they may not want to maybe even talk, even though they have something to say, because they're so overstimulated
Mm.
that they just can't find the space to even gather their thoughts to even ask the question. And then
I
once
could
they probably
totally see
gather
that.
their thoughts, the kids run in the room. Something happened.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Yeah, that's more common than I think people realize. I mean,
Mhm.
I think especially for your audience, I mean, there's a lot. That's an emotionally taxing,
Mm.
physically taxing profession. I think
Mhm.
that's a lot. And I think there's a lot, even like being a business owner on top of all of that, I feel like is it adds to it. I think most coaching programs may not recognize because you're right, they're offering all the channels and people do
Mm.
collect them like Pokemon cards or whatever. And they're like, well, it's all good. Like that's all I needed. And you're like, that's actually not the point of this whole thing. But in using audio and being able to reach people and giving people that diversification of consumption, I think is really important. It sounds like your audience, the folks that you're coaching do appreciate audio and they are leveraging it because it gives and it probably fits from a just a lifestyle and into their lives in a way that doesn't prevent them from consuming the stuff that they paid for and they're trying to leverage and maximize and get the most out of to get the results. And I think that's key too. It sounds like and do you have you had specific feedback from folks about specifically the private podcast?
Yeah, so recently what happened is we have a private podcast for a coaching program that I pretty much did a beta for 3 times in the summer. And it was in combination with a collaboration of another program, but I felt like that program wasn't enough. So I added my own piece and I said, "Hey, you're gonna get mine low key for completely free, for a certain amount of time. But please note, it's not going to come with a typical portal. I'm going to put it all in a private podcast feed. If I feel like it does need a video, I'll just upload it to YouTube unlisted and you can see it there." And one young lady, they're not supposed to do this, but sometimes if they're not active, they don't know the rules of engagement in Telegram. So we have a
Mm.
Telegram group. And the one default of Telegram for coaches is that people could just click your name and send you a direct message, kind of like Instagram. But I
Oh.
tell them I don't respond via DMs to our coaching clients unless you're commenting on my posts, kind of thing. So she sent me some information about what she was going through and really apologizing for, I guess she's wanted to apologize, saying why she hasn't shown up for the program. And sometimes hard for me not to put on my therapeutic hat, but I'm like, everything is therapeutic. And so all I told her was no need to apologize, the whole give yourself grace. And I said, this is what I would like you to do before I told her like the rules about the deal. And I said, this is what I would like you to do. You can choose to disclose what you want to disclose because she had to disclose a lot of personal stuff. But one of the things she highlighted was that the audio portion kept her at least engaging in the content. But
Mm.
her apology was more around she hasn't launched her digital product yet, even though she was part of the original cohort back in June. And now at that time, it was September. And she saw people when she went back in starting at the same time and they were launching. And she was like, oh, no. So I said, go over into the group. And I am sure I know my community so well that they are going to give you a different perspective. And that's
Mm.
all I said. But I think you're going to get some love, probably more than you anticipate. And then I said, P.S. We would love if you have a direct question for me, blah, blah, blah. These are the channels, Q&A form, whatever. So she went over within 30 minutes. Telegram start blowing up. I mean, these therapists, you can't say you having a hard time in life. It ain't going, or it do you. But sometimes we get in our own head. So she
Mm.
went over there. It was like probably 20 plus comments saying, I'm going through the same thing. I'm so glad you spoke up. And she started telling them more than I thought she was going to tell them. But afterward, she went back over to the private message and she was like, I know I'm not supposed to be sending you a message, but I just want to thank you so much for telling me that. But what I want to highlight is what kept her accountable, at least to be locked into the program, is she put on there. We now use that as part of like our boot camp for the people who are going through lifing stages. And I don't put names or pictures of those clients clearly, is I'll say we have a good amount who will acknowledge that they're lifing. And it's okay if they just tap into the audio. They don't need to come to the live calls and they can go through the program at their pace. It's called self-paced for a reason. So don't make up something pretty much that I didn't say. You
Mm.
know, now we put that into our master classes or whatnot, just to like talk to different groups of therapists so that they can know
Mhm.
they all have a place and that we have this mechanism on the background that if you're tired of staring at a screen, it's okay. You can do whatever you want to do and just put in your earbuds.
So good. So you're actually using it to sell it a little bit too, because you said the master classes, right? So you remind
Oh
people
yeah.
that, hey, I care a lot about you. There's this feature that I've put in, and you can stay as tapped in as you need to be. I love that. Naming it, right? Name it,
Yeah.
and folks can say, like, that's me.
Hmm.
She cares. I'm going to actually finish this course. That's
Yeah.
super great.
And that phrase "lifing," like, how much
Lifing.
did that
Yep.
speak to, like,
100%.
"Yep, I'm lifing." Feels like some days more than others, but yeah, I think when people buy a coaching program, there's this weird assumption or thing that the restrictions that they put on themselves. Well, if I can't show up to every live coaching call, then I shouldn't buy it. I'm like, that's not reality, That's just not that's not likely. Like, the chances are, given tons of differences in work and life in general, you're not going to be able to hit every call live. I wouldn't expect that to be an expectation all the time.
Yeah. I will say though, every time somebody like talks to me about my clients, I'm like, but they're a little different. So these
Mhm.
are people who went to school their whole life.
Yeah.
So as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, that is true, but their brain is conditioned that if it's a 15-week course, if I don't show up, I'm going to fail because the
Mm,
professor said so. Technically, that is how their life worked
mhm,
before entering into entrepreneurship. So I have a running joke online and through my master classes. And I do get a little like bold with my words. I'll say, some of y'all are at the level of building your business where, anybody can go on the IRS.gov. And as long as you're good with Uncle Sam, you know what I'm saying, you can get a tax ID. But all the tax ID is a glorified social security number for somebody who's still an employee saying that they're an entrepreneur. And
mm,
a lot of y'all are that person, degree or not. You don't need a
mm,
degree to get a tax ID. You don't even need a whole business structure. You just need to say you want a business. And when I do a certain assessment called the Abundant CEO for like our private practice boot camp, a lot of them based on like it's a hierarchy that I found online through some research. And then I just modeled it based off of what I teach. And I make them rate their sales on a scale of 1 to 5. And ultimately they want to get to a place where they only do what requires their voice in their face. That's scalability.
mm, mhm,
But
mhm,
the bottom one is called the hustler. The next one is bare minimum. And so a lot of them, I don't think I've had one person that ever was at the abundant CEO. But the problem is they come into our programs believing that they're already there just because of their degree or just because, I don't want to say just because, but because they've made money. And
mm,
then as soon as I give them my assessment, which is why I will always give an assessment for every program that I launch, when they grade themselves, majority of the time they're 50 or below. And I tell them in
mhm.
grad school, a C is failing. So if you got a 50, you for sure need help. And if you choose
Mhm,
to leave this masterclass and not get help, that's not my fault. That's on you. So you can suffer, but I'm here,
mhm,
to help
mhm.
you. I got all these ways to help you.
Goes back to
Oh,
choices.
I was gonna say, like, I feel this in a way of they haven't had the identity shift yet. And so I remember one of my big identity shifts was like when you're not being paid a salary and you're working and you're showing up for someone else who's you have to go do this and you have to commit time here and you have to do this many office hours, but there's no like dollar tied to it. And then when I started a business, I realized that I was literally the person making the money. And so showing up to a coaching call, I'm like, am I going to do that or am I going to prospect? Am I going to right? Am I going to do this like thing that could be helping my business? And you start to devalue those coaching calls, I think, as an entrepreneur. Not that they're not devalued. Again, you mentioned this. There's like stages and like seasons of business and all the things. I showed up to my fair share of coaching calls, but now they hold like a different space in my head as to like how valuable they are. And
Mhm.
I think Hello Audio is actually one of the reasons why I was able to really bring them back in. And it was when we built it that my first favorite, like, use case because I was like, "That was so hard for me to go at a certain time." And now here I have the ability to listen because I know there's value in them. It's more like exchanging that for that whatever's happening potentially at that moment. And so I think that identity shift, because that was something I struggled with for a long time as well as an academic. Not that I, like, thought, "Oh, my degree serves me some level that I should have in business." I actually felt like there were positives, and I had to reframe that the degree is helping me in certain ways, but that identity shift of what it's like to be an employee versus somebody running your business, it takes time and yeah, investment, like you're saying, basically. And that investment might look like in the early days, that hustling of like showing up to
Mhm.
calls, meeting people. For me, it was meeting people in these courses and making friends that were also doing the same thing I was doing. And I didn't feel crazy. And so I think there's lots of things you're bringing up from a like teaching perspective that happens in these coaching programs and the way that audio can kind of help shift that. And of course, the way you're structuring your program very intentionally for your specific audience. So I'm really glad you brought that up because yeah, I think, there's people listening that apply our things we say in so many different ways. And I bet there's people listening that are like, oh, my audience, my profession that I work with, or my people that I work with are actually really similar. And they're probably getting a lot of ideas for you. So I'm glad you're like highlighting this is actually how my people are very like a little bit different or special. And I think all of us have that in our niches. So thank you for sharing that and the thought process behind it too. Cool. So I know you're like you said you're an experimenter, right? Is your middle name. You're a teacher. You've taken private podcast feeds, you're using it all throughout your business. Is there one you're maybe sitting on that you haven't launched yet that you're like, I should be getting this out?
Yeah. So the main program that we just talked about, actually, people want to open up a private practice throughout the year. And
Ah,
I have a split brain. And so one part of my brain is I've tried Evergreen before. It did work, but I didn't know that it worked because I didn't know what I was doing. And it was like an automated webinar. And that was
Mm-hmm.
in 2021. And so I took it off the thing. And then I started thinking about it again, especially when I maxed out in terms of my time or my energy would change because I'm all about energy alignment right now in my season. And so we've thought about, and we've created it, we put it out there, and then we snagged it down. We want to offer an option for running in the background for people to take pieces of what would have been in the boot camp, but just minimize it to give them just what they need, like the assessment and what is the
Mm-hmm.
program, and then just honestly hop on a Zoom call because we've recognized that because the therapists have different schedules, we get people even sometimes out of the country, but just different state lines. Not everybody's clearly able to come to a even live, webinar, or we sometimes stream it on YouTube at the time that we do it. Some people really don't like to watch replays, even though we recognize most of our clientele watches the replay for the boot camp. But I'm sure that there is a small segment of people, and they voted on it on my Instagram. I'm sure there's a small segment of people who still would want the option to have the audio. So I really, one day in life, because my kids are getting older and I want to be more and more present, I wanna put something on Evergreen, whether it's this program or something else, where also it's constant cash injection, but also my biggest thing is impact. So I don't wanna have to honestly tell somebody to wait 4 months to get inside the program, and I know that part may be slower, clearly, than
Mm-hmm.
the live one.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to be patient with myself
Mm-hmm.
because I got so used to live launching and people thrive off my energy, and it's
Mm.
very interesting. So, it's like they feed my little ego, at the same time, and then
Totally.
I'll get in my own head and say, "We offered the audio, but they didn't get it," and that's what happened. They didn't do it because they were like, "Oh, no, I'd rather have the video." But then I offer the video and you don't come. So,
Mm.
maybe I'm just gonna offer both and do an experiment for 90 days, and then we'll see from there.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you nailing and having done live launching for so long, and it doesn't feel like something, it feels like your bread and butter and like you know what you're doing. I think that you've created and established yourself, and then now adding that other layer. I think what I'm seeing is working in the online space right now is tends to be a mix of both if you can figure it out. And I think you've been doing this long enough that you know really well. And I think that's a little different. I think there's a lot of people that are like, I want my first course to be passive and evergreen and I don't have to do anything. Like they don't want to show up for nothing. And it's okay, fine. But usually you don't know who you're talking to, how to help them, like what problems you're going to solve. And I feel like with your years of experience and the number of students that you've helped, I actually think an evergreen program would do really well for you because I bet you know your people well. And so I think that should be top of your list for 2025 is layer that in because it's only going to increase revenue and impact for sure. And just yeah, I think you're sitting on something pretty great that if you could get it packaged up. And you know the things I think too it I think as a professor because I could feel that too. It's like there's something really magical about teaching and feeling like you're teaching and that happens in those challenges and boot camps and stuff. And that was actually part of my program where it's or part of my story was like, I felt like I wasn't teaching because I was doing one-on-one consulting and building courses for people. And I was just missing that part of me. And so I needed to make a course. Weird. But yeah, so I bet that energy and that lift that you have would go really well for your business and for your future students too. That your those people will be like, oh, now I can do it, right? For whatever reason. Or maybe then they would upgrade. You have a cool upgrade to do a live cohort version or something of folks who have the self, kind of thing. So I'm trying to remember, Nora, it was a podcast that was recently released. She did the email sequence on the back that matched with it. I feel like hers was very evergreen. Like I kind of liked her structure. She was selling the course, people could buy it. It was one of the most recent episodes that literally was either 2 weeks ago. I think it wasn't the one that dropped today or yesterday, but there might be something there for you. I don't know why, and I can't remember exactly why, but it was the way she sold her course Evergreen could be something interesting. And I think it was off a private podcast. And the whole course is a private podcast. It's actually not even video at all. Maybe that's, but I'm thinking more about how she sold it, less about it being an audio course. Do you know what I'm talking about, Nora?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I don't think that one was Natalie. I'll have to go back and
Yeah.
look. But it was the important piece there is the nurture or the follow-up sequence that
Yes.
was sent. So every you get they get access to the private podcast, which is fantastic. And I think in her model, she chose to give access. It was not dripped, and that was okay with her content specifically. But the follow up sequence was always pushing someone back to a specific episode, and even if they had
Mhm,
consumed
mhm.
it, that I mean, obviously, repetition is key in learning, and it still reinforces concepts and ideas even if you have already consumed it. And so that follow up sequence really did help people go back and consume it or repeat it
Mhm,
if they haven't already. And I think that
mhm.
was the key for her consumption rates going up and then ultimately her
Yeah.
client success rates.
Yeah.
And I wonder if Nicole Culver her
Oh,
episode
that's
has
one of my
something
friends.
too. Oh, cool. I wonder because she
She's
sells
at
on
Evergreen.
Evergreen. Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
they
I
were trying
bet
to get
she
me over
has.
there like 4 years ago, and I was like, "I no," because we were all in the same mastermind.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I posed it in front of our mastermind, and of course, they're looking at the metrics, and they were like, "Don't fix
Mm.
something that don't need that's not broke." And I'm like, "Alright." But yeah, I've consulted with them a lot. They used to run my Facebook ads and,
Oh,
it's
cool.
just a bit. I think one of the things that I would have to work on is that assessment piece. It seems like that's the
That's
thing that makes them sign up. And
mm,
everything that you're mentioning, I do wanna go listen to that episode because we set up all of the emails linked to when they're done with this episode, this email goes out. I set up all that, and then when it got to the assessment, I was like, I think it was more, is the PDF enough for
mm,
them to follow along? Are they gonna open it? Because one thing I noticed is if I put a video link, even if it's like a Loom video, I don't know who watched the video. And I want to literally send them an email right after they see that
mhm,
assessment video to get on a
mhm,
call with me. Cause
mhm.
the assessment is built off of our course framework.
Yeah,
So if they can complete the assessment and grade
yeah.
themselves, their grade will tell them if they need to hop on a call with me or not. And I need to figure that part out. Like, how can I make this verbal where it's not
Why
too much?
yeah, I was just gonna say, why can't you turn it audio? The
Well, no,
results
I
audio.
did, but I
Oh,
think it's
okay.
like the therapist brain of needing to follow along with
Mm,
the questions, because when we do
interesting.
the assessment, they may not come to the other live parts of the boot camp and they'll watch it on a replay, but
Mhm,
they will come to that assessment. It's almost like
mhm.
taking a test in class live.
Yeah,
And so,
that's
it's
interesting.
like, yeah, they'll be like, "Where's the screen?" And I'm like, "But
Mhm.
I can't track the screen." And that little audio is going out the system.
It doesn't give me the data.
Stay
Yeah.
in here.
Right? And I hate it.
I have a feeling you'll figure it out. I think
Yeah,
you're
I'm sure.
close. But I'm excited for you because I do think offering something evergreen definitely is gonna fit
Mhm.
into your business model for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
People need it. I can
Mhm,
already
mhm.
tell. Yeah, I can
Mhm.
tell.
And you'll still get your energy and your excitement from the live stuff too, so you can do
Oh,
both.
yeah. I thought that I could save the energy. That's what me and my team were saying. Like, we can do
Mm,
2 big live launches, and that way
mm,
they'll miss me and I'll miss them. It's and
Yeah,
right?
they'll just have to listen to
Totally,
the audio in the in between.
totally.
I love it.
Super fun. Cool.
Thank you so much for being here. I mean, I'm so excited. Thank you for sharing all the ways you're using private podcasts. Thank you for being a Hello Audio user. We're just really
Mhm.
honored
Thank you.
that you're choosing and using Hello Audio to make this big of an impact. And I'm excited. I'm hoping, I know, not even just hoping, I know we'll do a follow up episode next year when you launch your
Mhm.
Evergreen. And I'm sure you'll find new ways to use it too. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to connect again. Thank you for being
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
I wanna tell y'all too, some of my clients are using it, the therapists.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
that's one of the
Good.
things I do is teach them how to use it for digital products, and
Oh, good.
some
You
of
were
y'all
on our
voice is so
affiliate
good.
program, right? You're in the
Uh-huh,
affiliate program? Good.
yeah.
Awesome.
So some of them use it for, like, meditation
Oh, uh-huh.
for their clients and stuff.
Oh, like in the practice, not even yeah,
Yeah, they can do it for
super
their
cool.
practice, or they can
Mhm.
se some of them just wanna sell simple digital products from what they already do,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
like, "Your voice is just so calm with us. Can you
Mhm.
just, like, record what you just said? And can
Mm.
you give it to somebody?"
Yeah, totally.
So, some of them, it's their digital product.
I love it.
That's perfect.
That is
Yes,
perfect.
and easy. It feels
Mm.
easier than trying to
Mhm.
I mean, we know
It
we don't
really
like
does.
all the slides and the video but after the day they typically can have, like, audio feels
Mm.
doable,
Doable.
more
Yeah.
doable.
Mhm. Cool. All right, we have to end with our famous final question. If you had a private podcast feed of your life's musings, what would it be called, Dr. TK?
The abundant experimenter.
Ooh, I love
Nice.
it.
That feels
Those are the
spot
key words
on.
for this episode. Yeah, very cool. Yes, I love it. Keep us posted. And yeah, thanks for stopping by and sharing all your goodness.
Thank you.
Sweet. We did it.
Awesome.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.